Let us pray.
O Lord, take our minds and think through them. Take our lips and speak through them. And take our hearts and set them on fire. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Some selected readings from Matthew or Mark or Luke's Gospel, I'll get it right. The 15th chapter. And when he cometh home, he called together his friends and neighbors, saying unto them, Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep, which was lost. And when she found it, she calleth her friends and neighbors together, saying, Rejoice with me, for I have found the piece which I lost. For this son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to be merry. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive again, was lost and is found. You don't always get what you deserve. That came right out of a litany of my grandfather's one-liners. Some of them were quasi-religious. Some of them were not original. Some of those I think he was trying to be funny, but we were regaled by his one-liners. He would often say, you know, Charlie, a stitch in time is worth a pound of cure. A bird in the hand gathers no moss, he would say. And I'd say, Grandpa, I don't get that. He said, well, you live as long as I have, you'll understand that. He often would say, I feel more like I do now than I did a little while ago. I'm still thinking about that one. But the funniest one, I suppose, of all was when he would say, you can lead a horse to water, but if you can get him in there on his back and float, you got something. Following a sermon on the parable of the prodigal son, he said, I don't get it. Maybe sometimes you don't get what you deserve. Well, I'd heard the opposite, hadn't you? You sow to the wind, you'll reap the whirlwind. You made your bed, lie in it. You get what you deserve. How can you explain Jesus' risking 99 sheep out there in the wilderness to go find the one? Doesn't make sense. Or a lost coin becomes an occasion for a party, a celebration. And that vagabond, that wasted boy, comes home and it's an occasion for a party. It's this sense of fairness that we have difficulty comprehending. Sometimes this grace comes across as condoning. Of course, parties and celebrations have not always been fully appreciated and valued. There are some people who think a party is never appropriate. In these three stories in the 15th chapter, you hear something got lost, you see something got found, and the thing that I think we often overlook is that in each occasion there was a party, celebration. It's never appropriate. Some people give you the impersonalities that they are cleaning up after a party to which they've not been invited. Some say a party's not practical. Why don't we sell the violins and buy hammers and hoes? Pull up the roses and plant onions. A meadow is a grass and a forest is a wood. Everything in life is profit and loss. Sunrise is a time to get up and go to work. Party's a waste. Others say party's okay, but not now. It's premature. This prodigal, you know, he's going to come home and take a bath, get a good meal, get a clean shirt, and he's off tomorrow again. Don't throw a party. A wedding party. Isn't that interesting? They haven't been married a day yet. And you're throwing a party. How do you know the marriage is going to last? Graduation party. Come on. Isn't it a little too early? No job security. The doctor's report is in. It's a good report, but don't celebrate that because you know there are a lot of germs going around. A birthing in the family, a party. Better wait. Boys and girls get in trouble, you know, and they can grow up to be worthless. The party is so insensitive. How can you party when there's so much misery in the world? As you scrape off the food up your plate, remember the starving ones in all over the world. You're enjoying your clothing. Don't you know there's so much cold in the world? So many people are naked. Company of friends, you're enjoying your friends. Why do you do that when there's so many lonely people? You see, I get the feeling sometimes that some preachers enjoy the black background more than they do the diamond. Did you hear it? Lost, found, party. You see, an undue emphasis upon lost to the neglect of party means that grace is in waiting. Restoration, yes, but to a banquet? Bread and water, yes, but to a fatted calf? Sackcloth, to be sure, but a robe? Tears, not merriment. Kneeling, not dancing. Max Lucado said, I have never been surprised by God's judgment, but I am still stunned by his grace. Sodom and Gomorrah, let them have it. It's easy to think in terms of judgment. You get what you deserve. Those fleeing Israelites being pursued by those Egyptians drowned the whole wild lot of them in the river. Ananias and Sapphira, that's a no-brainer. "40 years in the wilderness, that's pretty good for some stiff-necked people who need to learn a lesson about obedience. Grace, that's another thing. Ask Peter. Ask Peter the denier, swearing, denying, who becomes the preacher of Pentecost. How? Ask Zacchaeus, that tax collector, where he ends up opening his house for an announcement about the gospel mission. Or that thief on the cross, hell-bent, becomes heaven-bound. Laborers, now this is one. Those laborers who get in on the job at the last hour end up getting the same pay as those who came early in the morning. It isn't fair, I tell you. Frederick Buechner says that the crucial eccentricity of the gospel is the assertion that we are saved by grace. Crucial eccentricity. I've always struggled with grace. Always have, probably always will. Law, order, discipline. Pull up the roses and plant onions. And that was the kind of preaching that I heard as a child. Although I didn't hear this, this is what I heard. You dirty rat, look what you did. You crucified Jesus. And I was to weep myself to sleep many a night, apologizing to God for killing his son. Always on the treadmill, always trying to measure up to other people's expectations, and the harder I tried, it seemed the farther behind I would get. No preacher ever came to our church without at least one convert. I took Killian in speech, and he did me a lot of good. Every preacher got a convert, at least one, me. I was born again so many times I had stretch marks on my soul. And then during a very dark and troublesome night of my own soul, when I came this close to cashing it all in, really not fully understanding grace, always struggling, sweating, scheming, trying to make it, feeling inadequate, insecure, never measuring up. No party for me. You know, there's only one way that I can explain this parable, and I've written my own 15th chapter of Luke. Let me tell you my version. In the 6th grade, back there in northern Indiana, I had a school teacher by the name of Howard Robbins. There's nothing worse than getting a new teacher in his or her first year. They seem to have a lot to prove. And Mr. Robbins was, he would have made a good German Gestapo leader. He even walked with a goose step. He'd come into class and he'd say, "Today, class," and his head would often vibrate. "Today, class, we're going to do nines. You like nines, don't you, Charlie Killian?" I said, "No, I prefer threes." "No, it's nines," and scared me to death. Now, it could be that I was fluffing around and not doing my work, which was easy to do. Could be that that was the first year that the grade moved up to the 2nd level. You were now in high school floor. And I was feeling cocky and a little bit of arrogance. And I don't know what it was like at your house at grade report card time. But at our house, it was Judgment Day. I mean, literally. Mother would say, "Your report card, Charlie, is a reflection 3 generations back." Boy. What a load to carry. I wasn't thinking about that as I was having a good time there with Mr. Robbins. And finally, the grade cards came out. And I have it here with me this morning, my 6th grade report card. And on that first 6 weeks, I had 4 F's. I knew that I was dead. In fact, you had to sign your name. Your parent had to sign their name on the back. You remember that? There's no signature on that first one. And I took it back and I showed it to Howard, and Howard Robbins said, "Well, what's wrong? You didn't show that your card to your parents." I said, "Yes." "Well, why didn't your mother sign it?" She wasn't pleased. And that's the way she tried to manipulate us into better grades. An unsigned report card. It was almost blasphemous. And I remember walking home that day. School was only a block away from home. My brother and the 2 brothers and sisters had gone ahead of me. And Mother had a ritual. When you brought your report card in, it was like you were presenting your mother with a trophy. Yeah. And you'd bow. Mother was in the sewing room sewing. It seemed that Mother was always sewing, either in the kitchen and sewing. And I went upstairs to the back door and hid under the bed. I didn't want Mama to see this card. Pretty soon I heard my name. "Charlie? Where's Charlie?" They came looking for me. My brother found me under the bed, and I said, "Bill, look at this report card." I was crying. He said, "You're dead." "Mom wants to see you." I walked downstairs with my card in my hand, and I can still see those tweedy beige curtains hanging there between the living room and the dining room. My mother had one of those early sewing machines with a big treadle that had different gears on it. The further down you pushed it, it would go into high gear. Mother was a large woman. She weighed over 300 pounds. That had nothing to do with the story. But you'll get the point here in a minute. I closed my eyes and I handed the report card in through those curtains, thinking my eyes closed, it would bring some solace. We heard a thud. Mother had collapsed, fainted over the top of her sewing machine. Her foot had hit that foot feed, sent that machine into high gear. George, Pat, and Bill came running, and they said, "You've killed Mom." We pulled her back. She was sweating. Her hair was all matted, and I'm crying and telling her that I'm sorry. I'm so bad. I'm no good, Mama. I'm sorry. I'll do better. You know, you've been there. We finally brought her around, and she said, "Charlie, Charlie, Charlie." Whenever she mentioned my name 3 times, it meant I'm deeply, deeply disappointed. She says, "No supper. Go to your room, and then you'll have to show this to your father." I said, "No, Mama. I don't want to show these failing marks to Father. You'll have to show your father." I worried and cried in my bed until after supper was over and the dishes were done and the children were dispatched to the rooms, and finally my father calls me downstairs. I don't know what Mother said to Dad. My father only spanked me twice, and I didn't want that again. My father was holding my report card, and he said, "You know, it doesn't have to look like this. I don't suppose you'll ever bring another report card home again like this, will you?" I said, "No, Daddy, no." He said, "See to it. Now you're going to bed." And I walk upstairs, and I'm thinking, that's it. Grandpa was right. Sometimes you don't get what you deserve. Sometimes you're given grace. Later that year, on April Fool's Day it was. I don't know how it is in your part of the world, but in northern Indiana, April Fool's Day rivals Christmas. You lay awake at night and think of ways how you can trick your friend or your school teacher, and April the 1st was going to be Mr. Robbins' day. We hadn't seen him smile all year. Ted says he'll smile at this one. "What are we going to do, Ted?" Being one of the brighter ones of the diet, I said, "What are we going to do, Ted? What are we going to do?" He said, "I'll tell you what you're going to do, Charlie." It wasn't original with us. We'd heard about it. That if you take an old piece of canvas and you rip it just right, it makes the kind of sounds that causes little boys to giggle. Now, if you want that in Technicolor, I'll give it to you after chapel. We ripped and we laughed and we cried, couldn't even sleep that night because tomorrow we're going to get the old boy. After the second recess, Ted had gone up and put a quarter to the left of the maps. And he was going to lift his hand and interrupt Mr. Robbins, as he said would be far more damaging than for me to pull the trick. And I said, "Okay, Ted, okay." Mr. Robinson's reading about the Alps somewhere in Switzerland, and Ted lifts his hand and he says, "What is it, Ted? It better be important." As his head began to vibrate. "Mr. Robbins," he said, "Mr. Robbins, there's a coin. Somebody's lost a coin. Maybe it's a button there to the corner of the maps." And Mr. Robbins looked over there and let out a sinister giggle. "You know the rules around here, boys and girls. Losers, weepers. Finders are keepers." Mr. Robbins always wore trousers about 2 sizes too small. Looked like his pants had been sprayed on him. We never saw his belt. It was just kind of in there somewhere. And he turned, exposing his backside to us, and he bent over to pick up that coin. And when he did, I did it. It was good. He jumped up like he'd been hit with a cattle prod. And he moved to the backside, moved to the chalkboard, checking his backside to see whether or not there'd been an accident. Then everything got silent. And he said, "Who did this awful thing? Who did this awful deed? There'll be no recesses until I find out who did." In fact, this is April the 1st, school's out, May the 20th, no more recesses. And at that particular moment, the entire class fingered me. Mr. Robbins came back there and he saw that piece of tarp that I had and got me by the back of the neck and threw me out into the hall and told me not to come back until I could act like a decent human being. Go down and see Mr. York. "Mr. York? Mr. York?" Mr. York had an electric paddle machine. We could hear it. There are days you could hear it. Hum, 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 hum. I didn't know till years later that that was the ditto machine. And I went down there to Mr. York, and Mr. York was a big man. He was bald-headed, just like Mr. Robbins. He stood about 6'5". He had big, thick lips and a big, thick tongue. And he says, Killian, what are you doing down here? And I told him what I had done. He said, get out of my school. I know Al Maybell, they'll give you a punishment worse than death. Go on. Go on home. Don't come back until you can act like a decent human being. You know, I wasn't feeling very decent or very human, but I walked home slowly. Mother saw me coming. I was in tears. My face was red, and she said, son, you've got a headache. You're sick. You got a flu. Come take some rest. I said, no, Mama. No, not this time, Mama. I've done something very, very bad. I'm no good. She said, well, what did you do this time? And I told her what I had done. I gave her all the facts and details, knowing that when you tell all the truth, it would go easier with you on the punishment end of things. That's the way they treated me. And so I told her everything. She said, go to your room. There'll be no supper. I had supper once when I was in high school. Again, supper was over, and Dad calls me downstairs. And he said, I understand something interesting happened at school today. I went out and got a piece of tarp and brought it in and demonstrated for my father, thinking he would think it was funny. He didn't think it was funny, although I did notice him biting his lower lip. Said to Mom, I'm going to the garage, and I knew what that meant. Between the garage and the house was the breezeway where we kept the wood, those instruments of torture. The kindling, and Dad was going to pick up a piece on his way to the garage, and I would meet him there to get my punishment. Mother said, go to your father. I said, I don't want to go to the father. You have to go to your father. And I started down that long corridor, seemed like a mile. Got halfway down the breezeway, and I heard what sounded like laughter. I said, no, that's not Dad. Somebody else is there. They've told a joke or something. Maybe it'll go easy with me. I'd already put a used arithmetic workbook in my backside. Well, I got spankings. Mother and Dad knew where it belonged, and so I was ready for it. I had a couple of books there. I got to the garage, and I turned around to look in the garage, and there was my father, alone, draped over the hood of the car, pounding the top of the car, convulsing in laughter. He was drying his tears with the back of his hand. Mom, all 300 pounds of her, were following shortly behind, and she had gotten up her gingham apron and had buried her head in the flood of tears as well. I'm starting to feel a little easier. She takes me by the arm. We go down to where Dad is, and we huddle, and we laugh. We just laugh. And as laughter will, it dies down. And Dad said, now, son, that's just about the funniest thing I've ever heard. And I suppose the old boy deserved it. And I suppose Mr. York thinks you're going to get a punishment worse than death. And I said, those were his exact words. He said, we'll never tell him any different, will we? I said, no, Dad. He said, you know, getting kicked out of school in the middle of the afternoon is an embarrassment to your mother and to me, and we don't like that. I don't suppose that'll ever happen again, will it? I said, no, Daddy. No. You see to it. Now, that's not the real story. I mean, that's not the end of the story. The real punch of the story came on Monday morning. Didn't know till years later that Dad laid off work. And we walked hand in hand to the school about a block away. We walked into Mr. York's office. Mr. Killian, Mr. York, I brought back Charlie to you to sign him in. And I can assure you, Mr. York, that he'll be of no more trouble to you. Is that right, Charlie? That's right, Dad. Okay. Another thing, Mr. York, he's a good boy. He's a good boy. And he'll be all right. In the dark night of my soul, as I said earlier, when I almost threw it all away, I was found again by story, redemptive, healing story. Tough sometimes to take failing marks to the Father. And some of you this morning may be experiencing some failing marks. You need to take it to the Father. I don't know if you've seen Les Mis, starring Liam Neeson. Story about a man, Jean Valjean, who was in prison for 19 years for stealing a piece of bread. He was released and was sent to a door. Says, have you ever tried that door? And it happened to be the door of the bishop, where he was entertained with a wonderful meal, and all that Jean could see was that silverware, and he'd make away with it in the middle of the night. He could get away with it, maybe injure the one who would give it to him. And he did steal the silverware, and the next day he was brought back to the bishop's house. And this is what the bishop says. Jean Valjean, my brother, you've come back. Why didn't you take the candlesticks? I gave them to you. Now I want you to go in peace. Don't ever forget that you have promised me to use this money to become an honest man. Jean Valjean, my brother, you belong no more to evil but to good. I redeem you from those black thoughts and the spirit of perdition. I give you back to God. That stuns Jean Valjean. It transforms him. It changes him. And Javert, the inspector, knows he is a thief and a crook, and he relentlessly pursues him because he lives according to the book. And these acts of grace that Jean Valjean gives to his town, to his people, to the marginalized and poor, just blows his mind. He cannot comprehend it. Javert can't. In the music version of it, it's towards the end. You hear Valjean, hear him listen to the inspector's words. Damned if I'll live in debt to a thief. I'll spit his pity back in his face. There's nothing on earth that we share. It's either Valjean or Javert. And in the end, as you know, Javert chooses the River Seine. And Valjean dies within arm's reach of two candlesticks as the chorus ends the play. Come with me, where chains will never bind you. All your grief at last behind you. Lord in heaven, look down on him in mercy. And I suspect when this is all over, when it's all over, when we've given it our best, and we lay the trophies at his feet, we are at our eternal rest and peace. We, all of us, will die within arm's reach of two silver candlesticks, or within sight of an everlasting grace and a merciful Father. That is our only boast. By his mercy, Lord in heaven, look down on us in your mercy. Because every last one of us here this morning will not get what we deserve. We will be given grace, marvelous grace. Infinite grace. Some of you need to come to the party. Lost, found, but the celebrating part is where we are in awe and in debt to the grace. Am I talking to some student here this morning who is still struggling with this business of grace? You're on the treadmill, struggling, sweating, scheming, trying to win the favor and approval of God, when he wants to say to you, as he said to Saul on his way to Damascus to mop up a few Christians, Saul, Saul, I want you on my side. And he never got over it. To you, to me, the wild lot of us, it's on the house. But like any gift, it's not a gift until you reach out and take it and receive it. If God, through his Holy Spirit, has spoken to you this morning as we sing, I invite you to come and begin to party. 378.